Good morning. Welcome to your Tuesday morning briefing. Here's what you need to know to start your day.
We must lower the tax on business, and we must repeal job-killing Obamacare. People say, oh, that's free trade. No, that's stupid trade. We hope John McCain gets better very soon.
Quite often for people who are given information during the heat of a campaign to ask what that is, that's what simply he did, and there was nothing that, as far as we know, that would lead anyone to believe that there was anything except for a discussion about adoption of the Majinsky Act.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and these texts are great. This is exactly why, Amy, you don't try to please everybody. Just do the best you can and do what you think is right, and let the chips fall where they may.
And remember what Mary Tyler Moore said: "What people think about you is none of your business."
Oh, yeah.
Remember that.
Oh, I always remember what Mary Tyler Moore says.
I know why. Stuck with me. But yes, what do you have
for our Jonah Goldberg interview?
Chief.
A lot of reaction to our Jonah Goldberg interview last hour from 847. Great interview from 708. Boring. So you can't bridge that gap. You either like it or you don't. And then from George in Elk Grove, I don't know what the hell you and Jonah were talking about, but I hope I'm getting smarter by listening. So, it's going to be a mixed bag out there. Yeah. So do what you think is right, make a case for it, and, deal with the public reaction, which is good advice for Governor Rauner on the issue of school funding that he has taken up yesterday, calling on the Senate. Translation, Mike Madigan. Yes. Calling on Chicago Democrat bosses, the Shetland people in charge of our state, to release SB 1, the school funding bill, so that he may take it up and do what he going to do. He's going to make you do what he do, baby, like Ray Charles, and that is probably to mandatorily veto it so that there's not a Chicago bailout, and this was the argument that took place yesterday in the public arena.
And he was great because he sounded tough, he sounded strong, and it's the best I've ever seen Governor Rauner.
Chicago will not get the money. Decatur is going to get the money. And you know how much more money Decatur teachers and students are going to get? $1.6 million per year. Think about that.
Thinking about it.
I am. I'm still processing it.
But superintendents and Dem legislators.
Yeah, they all, well, here's your Democratic legislator. Who's your girlfriend name? Oh, Melinda Bush.
There are 268 districts that get more money per pupil than Chicago does in this formula.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is this right? Is that correct?
It's irrelevant.
All right. Is this
irrelevant? I mean, Melinda Bush is whistling past the graveyard because she's up in Lake County, and she can't be perceived as supporting legislation that bails out Chicago at the expense of Lake County schools, which is exactly what she's doing by supporting Senate Bill 1, as I'll explain in a moment. But let's hear from the superintendent.
Yeah, they all gathered yesterday, superintendents from Barrington, Round Lake. Here's your superintendent from Barrington, Brian Harris.
No district loses money. I can tell you from my district's perspective in particular, it was very important for us to make sure that there was no Robin Hood scenario going on.
And up next to the lectern was Round Lake Superintendent Constance Collins.
The current state funding model, Round Lake has lost over $18 million from 2012 through 2016.
Right. So here's the thing. And this is why what that Barrington School Superintendent Brian Harris said is so absurd. Understand one thing about school funding in Illinois. The general state aid, the money that schools get from the state, is run through a formula that by definition is redistributive, meaning it takes from some and gives to others. There is no everybody wins scenario in redistribution. You're by definition taking from some and giving to others. Do you get that? So what the Democrats have said is, well, we're going to hold harmless the impact of the formula for a period of time. So we've got this other pool of money. So whatever money you'd lose under the formula, whatever money you'd lose under the formula, do you get it? Redistribution away from suburban school districts to Chicago to some downstate school districts. But whatever you'd get, we're going to make good on it so that you don't lose money this year, next year. You want to rely on a politician's promise in this state in perpetuity about your school funding in your community? Have you lived in Illinois for 5 minutes? You think that's a promise you can take to the bank going forward for time immemorial? Of course not. It's absurd. It's a scam. Yet another scam. Because everything, what's Prof's rule, every system in state government in Illinois is a Ponzi scheme. And this is another one. So understand that this is exactly what Barrington Superintendent Brian Harris said it isn't, a Robin Hood scheme. That's exactly what it is. And it's not Robin Hood even necessarily based on need. It's a Robin Hood to prop up school districts like Chicago that are actually very well funded, but horribly mismanaged and produce not terribly prepared students at exorbitant prices. And that's the other part of the story that neither, unfortunately, the governor nor, of course, the General Assembly is talking about. How about connecting inputs to outputs? We've increased K through 12 spending over the last 25 years, oh, by the way, at like a 45-degree angle. And results are flat, if not declining, in certain school districts. Do the results matter? Or is just throwing more money at it? And as long as you're saying Decatur gets $1 million more, Chicago gets $215 million more, and this district gets more, and this district's held harmless, as long as the funding level stays the same or is enhanced, by definition, your school's getting better, those aren't the results. In this state, can we connect inputs to outputs? Well, the answer is no so far. Maybe that'll change. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend, State Representative Mark Batinick, who is a Republican from Plainfield. Mark, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm not really sure how I'm going to top what you just went through there.
Well, I mean, to me, the governor is having the wrong conversation. He's trying to outdo the Democrats when it comes to redistribution, rather than saying, wait a second, here's what this does, as I've described it. The hold harmless provision is a scam. Its redistribution is to rob the suburbs, to bail out Chicago. Here's what your school district would actually see happen in the suburbs without this phony baloney hold harmless provision that is fleeting. And here's what the property tax implications would be for your community to make up the difference in terms of what the formula would actually do to your school district. I know that's a couple of steps, but it connects dots and it provides the whole picture for people in a way that just playing the I'm going to spend more money than you're going to spend game doesn't.
Well, look, I was actually at a school board meeting yesterday and listening to your little intro there. I mean, it's basic. This is really a scam on top of a scam on top of a scam on top of a scam. Chicago undervalues its properties. We've read many articles about that, but 30% of its parcels are in TIF districts. And then when the bill originally came out, the people who were pushing the evidence-based model talked about how even after those kind of two scams, Chicago has more property wealth that it should be putting towards its schools, especially versus what we do in the suburbs. But somehow with one of those last-minute amendments, it changed that and scammed it again, where they went from what's called a Tier 2 to a Tier 1. So they somehow changed the formula to make it a needy school district, even with all the scams and the undervaluing of the properties. So it's literally a multi-layered scam. And then on top of which, with the hold harmless model, they want to slide in legacy or some going forward pension costs, a little wonkish, that was traded with a block grant. So they're held harmless at a higher level. And then the scam on top of that is they're losing students, but they don't want to have the hold harmless based on students. They want to have the hold harmless based on how much money the school district got as a whole. So you got, 3, 4, 5 layers of scams there. So it's a little wonkish, but it is a lot of new tax dollars. We had a tax increase, and the vast majority of those tax dollars are going to Chicago public schools.
So where do we go from here? What happens next?
Well, I think the governor is definitely taking the right tack in saying, give me the bill now so I can act on it. You know, this bill was passed at the end of May, and some of the Republicans that voted for the budget didn't know that they were voting for a budget that was tied to the evidence-based model formula. They didn't know that. So what I believe the Democrats are doing is holding on the bill to try and force a crisis again and force Rauner to take the blame for not opening schools. We could be down there working on this issue right now. They could have sent that bill to him back in May or June, early June, so that he can mandatorily veto it or veto it, and we can move forward and try to come to some sort of agreement. But unfortunately, that's not how things work here in Springfield.
Well, and this point needs to be emphasized again, that those who voted this up had no idea what the implications would be for their school districts. They had no numbers. They had no idea. All they had was a pool of money and a promise, from the architects of this that their school districts would be held harmless. They have no actual idea what the long-term implications are for their school district. If, for example, that promise that ostensibly binds legislators for the next millennia in Illinois, which of course is unserious. They have no idea how it would impact their school districts, and this is why you're hearing cover stories like from Melinda Bush up in Lake County about how this isn't a bailout of anybody and it's fair and no school districts will be harmed and some school districts and my district will be helped in the short term.
Well, you also touched upon something. This is a very important point. You talked about outputs. And here's one of my biggest concerns with the input-output conversation we're having right now. My school district, where I've sent 5 of my kids to at some point or another, 2 are in college now, and they got scholarships, did well, and it's not it's not a Beverly Hills school district, but I'm proud of my school district. We have an average number of free and reduced lunch. Our demographics racially almost match within a few percentage points each racial demographic. The very average school district, it's a large school district. We spend just over $10,000 per student. The evidence-based model claims that we're supposed to be spending $15,000 per student. So I'm happy with my output. We could use a little bit more dough, but I'm happy with my output at $10,000 per student. And my question is, are we going to be buying these kids new Mercedes when they turn 16? Is that going to be – what do we do with an extra $5,000 per kid? So I take umbrage with the idea – evidence-based model sounds good in theory, and I want to do things based on evidence. But when I'm looking at the evidence out my backyard of a school district that I'm proud of, and they want to spend 50% more in order to get to quote-unquote adequacy, I don't know what's going on at all the other school districts throughout the state.
He is State Representative Mark Batinick, Republican from Plainfield, and you know why he's such a good legislator, Amy?
Oh, because he graduated from Bennett?
No, because he's married to a Bennett graduate, and he studied under her tutelage.
Yeah, if you can't be
a Bennett grad, you marry one.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Mark. Appreciate it.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot